Alright, so this is a demonstration video for DSCI 560 for Lab 9. So I'll give an overview of our setup and how our solution works, and I'll go over a bit of the code as well. Firstly, just some contributions from our team. So Xintong worked on the first part of the lab, so the data collection and processing stage. So just reading in the PDF data and then vectorizing that into the vector store. We used FIs for that, which I'll cover later. Linda worked on the conversation chain for the interactions with the LLM and the RAG pipeline. And then I worked on connecting all these pieces in a web interface that actually gives the interactive chatbot to the user and the ability to upload PDFs sort of on demand, and that will update the RAG pipeline, and the chatbot is going to have knowledge of whatever PDF the user uploaded, which I'll cover now. So our solution looks like this. So it's, as you can see, a chatbot, and it has a sidebar here for the previous chats that we're storing, and then for the previous PDFs that have been uploaded. So I'll just start by sending a message. We can see that created a chat, and then if I upload a PDF, let's see, I'll upload the ads cookbook that was in the lab files. So we can see it's uploading here, and I'll get a message once it's ready. So once it's ready, I can ask a question. For example, this. Just name the component libraries of this, and then it should give me the result based on the feedback, and we can cross-check that with the PDF. This is just one example I was testing with, so you can see the component libraries are at least listed here, these 6, and this is basically what I got in the response. I can make another query just for extra testing. So the features, those are mentioned over here, these right here. So we can see the chatbot clearly has the knowledge now for the PDF that I uploaded, and I can keep showcasing that with more, if I just keep on uploading more PDFs. So this is a recipes PDF. For example, I can now ask it to give me a recipe that's mentioned in that PDF, so beef and beer, for example, and it should give me not just a generic recipe for that, but the recipe that's mentioned specifically in that file. So we can see, for example, here we can see this recipe basically matches what's showing here, and I can ask it for another recipe just to keep showcasing that it has the right context. We can see here that one is mentioned here, and we can see it's the same recipe that's mentioned here. Cool. And then we can this is stored in the database, so if we refresh, we can still see this data here. So this is all being actually stored and persisted, and I can create new chats and yeah, pretty much the expected behavior you would think from a chatbot. And then in terms of the code, so we used a fast API for our backend, and we have a SQLite database for storing the PDFs that were uploaded. Not the PDF data itself, but just the file name, so we can display them here. The data itself is obviously extracted and vectorized and stored in the vector store in the form of embeddings. And then for the front end, we used React. It's mostly this code here. Most of our code is encapsulated in this app.js component. So this is just us, basically all the front end logic just to render the chatbot. And this is all inside our front end folder. And then the backend folder hosts, it has a database file that we're using that I just described. And this FIs index folder is our actual vector store. And then we have a PDS folder just for some sample PDFs that we were using for testing not in the web interface, but for one of the first part of the labs where you had to test this locally. So we just use these PDFs just for testing it locally, but they're not used when you're running it in the web interface. And then yeah, our backend file. This is basically where all the endpoints are for the Fast API backend server. So it has endpoints for creating a new chat, sending a message, retrieving all the PDFs just for displaying this here, retrieving all the chats, and so on. So this is just, there's not a ton of logic here. It's mostly just the endpoints and just handling the data, and then most of the logic gets passed down to this file, which is called data storage. And this file has basically the core of the logic. So it has the RAG pipeline set up, it has the PDF extraction logic, and it has the actual LLM conversation chain logic. So it's a bit of a long file, so I won't go into detail line by line, but as a high level, for the PDF extraction, we're basically trying to extract the text directly first. And then if that fails, we have a fallback for using OCR in case the text is more in the form of images. So we have those two sort of like approaches, and it works pretty well as far as I've tested. And then we're doing some, after extracting that, we're doing some data cleaning before creating the embedding. So just normalizing things like end lines and like consolidating. Some cases there's like a bunch, especially in PDFs, there's like a huge space between paragraphs. So we're just normalizing that to be, for example, two new line characters instead of like more than 3, for example. And then we're removing like trailing white spaces and things like that. So just doing some pre-processing steps before creating the embeddings, which we're using, or we're creating the chunks first for text with this recursive character text splitter, which basically it just tries separators in this order when it's trying to chunk the data based on whatever the chunk size is, which in our case, after some testing, we did chunk sizes of 1,000 with an overlap of 300. So it just, when it's truncating the data, it just tries truncating it based on these separators in this order. And then, yeah, we have a couple of other functions here. This is what actually creates or populates the vector store. So we ended up using just a free model hosted on Hugging Face. It's a sentence transformers model. Here's the name. And that's where the vector store is actually being populated after the PDF extraction part. And then we have some helper functions just for the RAG part. Yeah, again, we're using a similarity search based on the user's question. And then we also had some logic for deduplicating documents, just in case that different PDFs are uploaded and they have like duplicated data. We're just removing some duplicated documents that might come up in the vector search, just so we actually get like distinct chunks of the documents. And then we're just keeping the top K from those, and K in our case is 5. So we're getting the top 5 chunks that we retrieved. And then we also have some like fallback logic in case it couldn't retrieve anything from the vector store. It just tries to answer the question just without any additional context. But that's typically just a fallback that generally doesn't get used. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. This function is just for running this whole setup, but just locally. So just with the PDS files defined here instead of through the web interface. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And just for running it, there are 2 files. This one's going to run the backend server, and this one's going to run the front end. So you just need to run these files and just make sure you install all the packages in the requirements file. That's pretty much it. And you would need an OpenAI API key, because we are using OpenAI Not for the embedding part, but for the LLM conversation part, we are using GPT 4.1 mini. So yeah, that's pretty much the only requirements, but all this is specified in the README as well. And that's it. Thank you.